Okay, I'm going to try to show you how to get started building your course map in Inkscape. Once you've gone through the course terrain tool process, if you're building a real world course, you're going to end up with a folder that's got a bunch of files in it, and one being this inner.svg file. And this is where you're going to want to start with your course map. Go ahead and open this in Inkscape. And I'll show you how to set up the color palette and then do some basic tracings to build your course map. So once you've got your SVG open in Inkscape, make sure you've done the process to set up the color palette. So you can download our specific OGS color palette. It's a .gpl file from our help docs. You can just right click on that button and save it as palette.jpl or OGS palette, however makes sense to you. And then in Inkscape, you want to come to Edit and then Preferences, and then click on System here on the left and find where it says User Palettes. You can open that folder there and make sure that you drag that GPL file you just downloaded and make sure it's in this folder. You might need to restart Inkscape, like exit out and reopen. But if things went well, you should see in this bottom right hamburger menu, you should see this as an option, Open Golf Sim Surfaces. And with that palette selected, you should see just the surfaces. If you hover over these, you'll see fairway, first cut, rough, water, river, all sorts of different surfaces that you can add here. So the next thing to sort of double check is to go to File and go to Document Properties. It should do this automatically, but it's good to double check that your units are all set to millimeters. And we're basically using millimeters as meters in Unity or Unity units. So your width and your height should match your terrain's width and height in Unity. So in my case, it's 2250. And all this looks good. But again, it's good to double check not only that your display units, but your size is correct. And everything looks right in my SVG so far. The image you're seeing here is called your hillshade, and it should kind of look like the surface of the moon, but a representation of your course's terrain. So the next step is to hide your hillshade. If you come over here to your layers, you can hide your hillshade and your Bing to kind of like see the different satellite and hillshade imagery that you got to work with here. Usually what I do is find sort of my favorite or the better quality satellite imagery for tracing, and this Bing one looks a little bit better because it's got some harder edges and just a little bit more definition to things. So yeah, you're basically ready to start tracing. I like to lock my overlays layer so I avoid adding any shapes to it. The first step is to grab this pen tool. You want to add paths to your course layer here to represent different objects and surfaces on your course. So for example here, let's go in real deep and we'll go to this whole one here and we'll start tracing the tee boxes. So I can come down here and select the tee color and then click and add points using the pen tool to sort of trace around the tee box And there you go. Now I've got a T-box traced around that shape. You're going to find it tempting to use shape tools. So if you had a square T-box and you wanted to just use this square like this, the problem is that this isn't a path in Inkscape, and it won't trace right when you do the meshes later. One thing you can try to do is use the flatten. So if you come with the path and you go to flatten, flatten will convert it to a path. So you see how that shape in the layers changed from a square, like shape icon, flatten, and it changes it to a path icon like what we need. So you can use that. You at least test with it. I haven't done much testing. I try to stick to pretty much only using the pen tool, and you'll be safe with that. So let's trace this next T-box here. Again, I'm just going to do this really quick just to show you the process here. And I'll show you a couple other things. So imagine you've traced this fairway and you've got a nice fairway shape going. And then let's imagine there's a bunker. Oh, I'm sorry, let's make sure we set the fairway color here. And then imagine there's a bunker in the center of this fairway, like that. And I go to bunker like that. This is fine. You can do this. What's going to happen is when you make meshes out of these, it's going to cut the shapes out that are layered above. So it's actually going to like compute that there's a hole in this fairway mesh, and instead of there being fairway under the sand, which would cause sort of Z-fighting in 3D space to have two surfaces like that, what's going to happen is it's going to basically do this and cut a hole out of your fairway. And you can cut holes as long as you're creating rings, essentially. As long as the exterior path shape, like if you were to make this an outline instead of a filled, and you would just see the outline of the fairway edge, that always needs to be unobscured. You can't cut the actual path later when you're doing meshes. And so what that means is you can't have, a sand trap that's sitting off like this layered above the fairway. This will cause cutting issues later. What you can do, however, is select in Inkscape here, you can pre-cut this by selecting both here and then coming up to flatten. And you see now that it's cut that shape out. And so you should be able to make a mesh here because the outline shape is not obstructed by the sand trap. So there's some small rules like that, just in terms of how you can place and shape objects on here. But for the most part, you'll find there's not too many overlapping shapes. A lot of courses have their sand separate from their fairway, and that kind of stuff. I will show you how to do fringes and first cuts pretty easily in Inkscape. And so if we were going to come here and do this green here, what I do is I start with the green surface and I trace that as best I can. And you can probably zoom in way more and get much more refined, but I'm just going to show you the basic. If I were to trace this green like that, and I wanted basically a few meter outline outside of this green, what I would do is duplicate this path or object. I'm not sure what the menu item is, but it's Control D will create a duplicate object, and then basically what you want to do is outset the object, and that'll just make the whole duplicated object bigger. And then if I come down here and it says set this to fringe, you notice it got just a little bit darker than the green. And then I want to put this behind the green in my layers. So now you can see I've got a green with sort of a perfectly outlined fringe. And now you could go in and play with it if you wanted to change these separately. So say you had this fringe that came out to like that. You could do something like that. Again, this is going to get cut out of this, so you're going to end up with a shape that's like a ring like this, and then a shape that's the green like this. You can do the same thing with fairways. You could duplicate your fairway, outset it, and then drop it behind the fairway to create a first cut around the fairway in a nice uniform way. You can control the outset size in your settings in Inkscape somewhere. So that's the basic gist. You're going to want to save your SVG periodically as you go, but once you spline out your whole course, you're going to want to feed this SVG file along with your terrain data to Meshery to create all of your different course meshes. And I'll have another video for that, so stay tuned. But let me know in Discord if you have any trouble or I've left any major part out of this video. Otherwise, good luck.